If you're interested in what I look like in real life, then make sure you check out my Instagram at Joe the Insomniak. I live in a suburban part of a small rural town in eastern Missouri, in a pretty quiet neighborhood. We've had one crime here in the past 3 years, and it was me who committed it. A jaywalker. Comprised mostly of elderly women and single mothers. We own 4 vehicles: my car, my mum's van, my stepdad's car, and my mum's old truck that's illegal to drive now. So I was home alone, about a week after my graduation, while my stepdad's at work. My mum was talking to my youngest brothers, and they had to go to the doctor's office, so they left. And my 2 middle brothers were at their friend's house, so I was lounging on the couch in my fuzzy robe and underwear playing Fallout. Good game. My stepdad is a professional chef and does 80% of our cooking at home. I have terrible anxiety and an addiction to investigation discovery. So whenever I'm home alone, I keep the longest, sharpest knife on myself or within an arm's reach at all time. It may have saved my life. Or something. This is confusing. There's a knock at the door, and it's not too suspicious. We frequently get solicitors and Mormons in the neighborhood, so I wasn't worried. Being a cautious person, I peek out through the curtains just a bit to see who it was. I'd seen this guy around the neighborhood before, walking around, and I don't feel threatened by him, since if it got physical, I had at least 5 inches on him and a knife. Anyway, I want to open the door, and I do so, figuring that at worst, I can politely turn him away, tell him I wasn't interested and go on with my life. At best, well, not gonna lie, he's cute in a generic way. So, I open the door, resting my hand on the back of the couch, where I've hidden the knife under a blanket, just in case. As soon as I opened the door, I knew there's something off. I've got a blunted effect due to a combination of depression, PTSD from abuse, and schizophrenic type personality disorder. So, I'm grown up, and I'm used to using fake facial expressions to fit in. I thought maybe he had similar problems because his face was not normal. He had a big friendly smile, right below a pair of absolutely dead eyes. "Hey beautiful, day out. Mind if I come in for a moment?" he said awkwardly. I kinda smile awkwardly and say, no, my mum don't like having strangers in. "Oh," his smile gets bigger. "What are you doing?" At this point, I'm starting to feel nervous. I shrug. Can't complain, I guess. "Are you here to sell something or tell me about God?" He shrugged back. "Oh, you know? Can I come in? Maybe talk to your mum?" I'll go get her. She's in the backyard." I moved to close the door and step back, not turning my back to the dude. Before I closed the doorway, he reached out and stops the door. His fake smile is gone. His face is dead. Not angry, just dead. "You're home alone. Your mum isn't in the backyard." I pause and swallow hard. Then I push the door again. "What do you want, man?" "To come in. Please let me in." I reach over, quickly sliding the knife from under my blanket and pointing it at him, saying, "I'm not gonna let you in. Leave." He looks down at the knife, back up at me, blinks rapidly, then affixated the smile to his face again, saying, "Oh, no problem. Goodbye." I watched him turn around and walk back down the street until he turned the corner. Then I locked and deadbolted every door and window in the house, got the dog out of my mum's bedroom, and resumed my gaming. I ended up calling my aunt's boyfriend, the only cop I trust, let him know what happened, stayed on the phone with him until my mum got home from the doctors. She called around town, found a couple of other people who'd seen him walking and driving around, but none of them knew who he was. So we were on high alert for about a week. It's been over a month now, and nobody in town's seen him. This old memory of mine, I've been talking about a lot because of the recent news of the Delefi murders. As the man I'm talking about looks similar to the first sketch, but this is 20 years ago and the sketch is now irrelevant. But anyway, when I was 12, I lived in Flagstaff, Arizona. If you're not familiar with this part of Arizona, it's not what you think of when you think of Arizona. It's a pondosora pine forest with mountains, and it snows in the winter. Anyway, across the street from my home was an entrance to some woods with paths. As my parents worked, and I was the first one home after school, it was my responsibility to walk the dog. Usually, I would take him just inside the woods entrance so I wouldn't have to pick up his crap from under the rocks that would usually be in sight. Now, usually, I was too afraid to go into the actual woods, even with my dog, because he was stronger than me and didn't listen to me well when we were outside. The other reason I didn't like it is the wolves, packs of wild dogs, sometimes cattle, seriously, and of course, anything lurking. But this day, I felt adventurous, I guess, and took him over there. We went pretty deep that day, and I didn't see another soul because it's about 3 PM and the people are at work. None of the neighborhood kids really hang out there either. Now my dog was excited by anything that moved and always wanted to greet another person, cat or dog. But this day, on the way back, I remembered him being steadfast, still pulling, walking me along on the way back home, ignoring squirrels and trees blowing in the wind. Then, out of nowhere, a man appeared on the trail in front of me. Now when I say out of nowhere, that's exactly what I mean. The woods are not dense, and usually you can see people from a mile away, as long as they don't surprise you. The man was dressed head to toe in brown and tan colours and gave a weak "hey" and doesn't make eye contact. The way he dressed stuck out to me, as everything but the treetops was brown, as there's actually a drought going on at the time. Even the picture I linked is more greener than it was then. As he passed me, I took a few more steps and turned around because he made uneasy and steady pace behind me. But he was gone. I could see probably 50 feet of the trail behind me. There's no reason I shouldn't be able to see him still. My kid brain starts going, maybe it's a ghost. No, he must be hiding. There's no way I wouldn't be able to see him immediately after passing each other. Maybe he was hiding in front of me, before he came out of nowhere. Maybe that's why he's got all brown on, trying to blend in. The dog didn't want to greet him anyway. It didn't make sense. It didn't take long for my dog and I to take off running all the way home. Thank God I had my goofy dog on me, because he was pretty aloft, but also protective. For all I know, maybe the disappearing woodsman watched me take my dog out every day, saw me wander in that day. I know I let my dog crap in the yard a few weeks afterwards. The reason it was so weird is that he was pretty much in perfect camouflage, and he had no dog on him or reason to be out there. I'm not sure exactly who it was. It definitely wasn't a hunter either, because hunting's illegal, and that's what creeps me out. Why on earth would anyone be in camouflage in the woods where hunting's illegal? My boyfriend and I went backpacking in the mountains. I'd been camping before, but only camping in a car, so never had to carry a bag on me for a long period of time. So this is my first time actually backpacking. Now after getting lost trying to find a parking lot, the map swore there was, but there actually wasn't. We drove around the mountains, finally finding a parking lot we could stay at. We'd planned to walk down the mountain, camp, then walk back up the following day. About an hour in, it's maybe 6 PM, and we come across this guy sitting off the side of the trail, cooking in a cheap stove. He said to us if we know why we're there and where we're at, and saying can we point him in the direction of a certain place on the mountain. He says he's parked there. He continues talking about how he had a friend drop him off who was going to pick him up at point A, and then changes his story to that he's parked at point B, and then said another friend dropped him off and went to hike somewhere else, and that he needed a map or something to get to point C. Yeah, I'm confused, and I don't like his story. We finally bid the dude good luck, saying we can't help, and continue down the trail. Now the trail is poorly marked and doesn't correspond with the map we found online, so we're really confused when we come to a horse trail with no markings to tell us if we're on the right path still. We decide to go down the trail and see if we can find a place to camp for the night and find our way out in the morning. Both sides of the trail are lined with barbed wire, preventing us from being able to camp there. Eventually, we run into a huge puddle in the middle of the trail. We decide to turn back and go back to the part of the trail before it turns into a horse trail. That way, we can camp there for the night, because it's really dark and we're tired. About 20 feet behind us, we see the man from earlier. He talks to us again, and through conversation, we learned he had heavy narcotics, including fentanyl, and another one I don't remember the name of. By this time, there's so many red flags, so we took off, deciding to go back to the car and just drive home now. We live 4 hours away, and we're about 6 miles from the car, so we take off up the trail as fast as we can go. I got severely dehydrated on the way and was struggling. I have lots of water, but it's very hot out, and we're practically running up the mountain now. Eventually, I start hallucinating, thinking I'm vomiting blood, which is red Gatorade, or there was blood coming from my shoes, which is sweat, and there may or may not have been a bear somewhere nearby, but I could have hallucinated it also. We ended up doing the full 6 miles up the mountain in only 2 hours. We reached a parking lot, and that's when I gave up. I decided to wait on a branch while my boyfriend got in the car. The parking lot was curved, so we're out of sight from each other. But he finally came back down to me with the car and helped me in. We found a gas station and slept for a little while before heading home. As we're driving out the park, we see a warning sign saying there may be an escaped convict in the area. This is a true story that happened to me. Back in the 80s, I was a camper at this place in the Adirondacks, a 6 million acre state park in upstate New York. All camps have their own customs, and I'm not sure if this occurred elsewhere, but if sitting around a campfire and smoke was blowing in your face, we would utter the phrase, "I hate white rabbits," and I swear this worked. The smoke would immediately move towards another direction. And no, it wasn't the breathiness of speaking the words that made the smoke move. It was rumoured to be a voodoo chant though. So things are different in the 80s. Things we did back then Might have gotten you kicked out of camp if you got caught, but to be honest with you, these days, you would probably catch a court case and get jail time. Like the time my counsellor locked me in his room with a 6-pack of Budweiser, tall boys, and told me I can't come out until I finished. But that's a separate story. This camp was right on a very large and pristine lake, and periodically, there would be hikes and canoe trips to some of the islands on the lake. You choose your adventure, basically. So we're on this canoe hike to a large, huge, massive island that's not too far from camp at all. We're all slackers, smokers and stoners on this hike. My kind of people. The island was so big. It had a pretty wide running trail that went around the perimeter of the island, wide enough to comfortably ride a 4-wheeler around. Were they allowed? Wider than I was tall at the time. Wide. So I mentioned this is in the 80s, right? That first night, some of us campers were partying with the counsellors. Beers were being drunk. Now at the time we're sitting around a fire, of course, and when the smoke blew into someone's face, they said the phrase, "I hate white rabbits," and the smoke moved. The next reciprocate of the smoke said the same words, and so on. And the smoke was being moved around fast from person to person. At the height of the frenzied chanting, the smoke almost looks like a vortex. The next morning, I opened my tent to see lying on the ground, spanning the width of the running trail, the biggest dead rabbit I've ever seen in my life. It was dead. It had eyes that were glazed over blue and white. I've really never seen anything like this before. I know it could have just been coincidence, but it was crazy. This happened a couple of years ago. I wanted to go to the local wildlife trail to walk in the woods. I'd gone several times to hike and jog. I normally went with my boyfriend at the time, but he was working and I wanted to go, so I decided to go by myself. I felt pretty comfortable going. I park at the far end of the parking lot in case anyone else appears. The trail continues straight from the parking lot for about a mile until it curves up a large hill. Where I wanted to go was the abandoned parking lot with a lake. The turn off to this part of the trail was about 400 yards down to the left. Once you turn left, you have about 200 yards of flat trail before it inclines. This inclined section is loose gravel and it's quite noisy when you walk up it. The last section is about 100 yards. I felt pretty at ease going along the straight trail before I turned left. When I hit the incline, I began to feel uneasy. I brushed it off as being overly paranoid and continued. As I went about halfway up the incline, I began to hear crunching and snapping of twigs in the woods to my right. It sounded about 100 yards off. It was just far enough into the woods that I couldn't see what's making the noise. I froze in my tracks and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I stood still as I heard the crunching stop. Stupidly, I brushed it off as a deer or bobcat. I continue up the path until I hit the end of the incline. That's when I heard this thing in the woods beginning to run at me. I froze in fear, my heart beating 1,000,000 miles an hour. Every hair on my body stood up. I was rooted in place. That's when I saw him. A man was running straight for me while holding something in his hand. I began to run down the incline back to the main trail. I was slipping and sliding down the gravel. I looked behind me and noticed how that he's at the top of the incline already. He had this evil look in his eyes. I noticed the item in his hands was a knife. I almost slipped up due to me looking back at the man. He called out to me, "Get back here now." His tone was malicious. I sprinted as fast as I could, and took a hard right back onto the main path. When I hit the parking lot, I didn't look back. I unlocked my car and started as quick as I can. Right as I was backing up, he emerges from the trail entrance. He just stands there, partially covered in the shade of the trees. As I tear through the parking lot and onto the highway, he just stares at me. The biggest, creepiest smile comes across his face as he slowly waves at me as I get onto the highway. I never went back to that trail. This encounter has scarred me for the rest of my life. I hate walking through the woods now.